Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star sports podcast presented by Underdog. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. We're catching up with the Royals and the Chiefs on this show. Chiefs beat writer Jesse Newell breaks down the storylines from the first 2 weeks of training camp at St. Joseph. We discuss rookie left tackle Josh Simmons and how another newcomer at tackle, Jalen Moore, fits into the equation. Also, we examine the secondary and the kick return game. But first, Star columnist Vahe Gregorian talks Royals. It's been an eventful few days for the club with trades and injuries and signings. We added up and asked if the Royals are in it to win it this year, or are they shaping up for future seasons with these latest moves? Okay, let's get started. Vahe Gregorian, Star columnist, is here. We're going to talk Royals to get this thing kicked off. And question for you, Vahe, is with all the moves and the developments that the Royals have experienced in the last couple of weeks, maybe even less than that, what does it indicate about the Royals' position in the playoff race?
Well, there's so much ebb and flow and churn. What a weird, wacky week for them, because whatever their philosophical leanings have been, they were all a little skewed by the Jack Caglione injury, by now the Chris Bubic injury. So there's a lot to interpret in this, but the broader reasoning, I think, is sort of exactly what we might have surmised the last few weeks. They are not retreating. As of now, as we speak today, the boldest move was not a trade, but it was a monumental move nonetheless. It was to not make Seth Lugo a chess piece, and I think you could say jeopardize whatever potential they have remaining this season, but also to be able to preserve the next couple seasons with this bedrock of the team. And I think, I wouldn't say it came out of the blue. I think it was clear a couple weeks ago the Royals had some thoughts about this, that maybe not that they could make the deal now, but that they could do this with Seth Lugo. But to flip that switch, I mean, that's dramatic, and it's I think a great message to the team that they're staying the course, basically. And one little side point about that yesterday that was also interesting to me was when Seth was conducting his news conference with J.J. Piccolo, the general manager, Bobby Witt Jr. and Michael Wacha came in the back of the room, and it wasn't, silliness. I mean, they were in there because they were appreciating the moment. So I think a lot good from that. And it's been easy to be cynical about the Royals over the years with 3 postseason appearances since 1985. But all we've seen the last 2 years in particular tells us that, that the trajectory is right and true.
I think what the signing tells us, which, by the way, 2 years, $46 million, with a chance for it to be 3 years, $63 million. I think what the signing tells us is if the Royals are within sniffing distance of a playoff position, they're going to go for it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's some muscle memory of an organization that is not, as you mentioned, 3 playoff years since 1985, one of them being last year, and they got a taste of returning to the postseason after a string of very unsuccessful years. If they're close, and by close, we'll define it as going into tonight's game against the Braves, game 2 in the series, 4.5 games back of the wild card, with I think 3 or 4 teams between them. They're going to, they're not going to retreat, to borrow your word. They're going to go for it.
And I think, what's interesting about that, you just alluded to the schedule a little bit. I'd have to reset to look at the numbers, but I think one of the things that informs their thinking is that a good number of these next games, especially in the next few weeks, are against the teams that they're in the mix with. So it's an interesting, even intriguing aspect of their sort of self-image here is like, well, we're going up against it. The reason we think we're in it is also we think we're going to, out best these teams through this. So, one quick addition to the points we've both been talking about with the number of postseason appearances. Obviously, they wanted to ramp it up this year from making the postseason last year, and I think a lot of the offseason thoughts were about, now we win a division, that kind of thing. But I've thought all along that it's just vital to fans, vital to sort of the momentum of the organization, simply just to get back to the playoffs again. And I don't mean settle for that, but I do think that is part of their thinking too, that we don't want to sabotage the next couple of years for this cause, but it matters to get there this year, just as the organization tries to get traction with a lot of things.
And keep in mind that in the history of the Royals, they've never had just a one-off playoff season.
Yeah.
They've always followed a playoff season with another one. So I don't know. Listen, that's just a statistical thing.
It is a quirk in a way, but it's interesting.
I don't think it informs their thinking at all, but it's back of the mind.
Yeah, we do this.
And I just brought it up. So
front of mind now.
Yeah. Well, as the Royals pursue a playoff position, they're going to do it with a couple of arms tied behind their back, sore arms, injured arms. The latest news is Chris Bubich is, fresh off his All-Star game appearance with a rotator cuff, left rotator cuff strain. He's on the IL, but he, as we know, he's done for the year. What a blow for the Royals, and he has delivered such a good season. He was probably a top 5 Cy Young guy until this happened.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And also to think of all he's sort of gone through to get to this point. It was interesting in talking to Chris yesterday. Arsene McDowell told me afterwards he thought I felt worse for Chris than Chris did because Chris seemed to be handling it so well. But I do think Chris immediately was talking about how he sees this as an opportunity to get better in other ways. Like he's flipped that switch, and I think that comes from some of the ups and downs he's been through. And I think also he has done enough now to know, or at least to believe, this season is who he is. And this is a speed bump, but this season is what he's got. And, sometimes that can, I think, really be a salve, if that's the right term, to help somebody through. One quick thing before I forget that I think you'll get a kick out of. So we got talking to I went to see Bob Kendrick yesterday at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, meant to talk about Ted Lasso filming there, but we got on a side conversation about Rich Hill. And
last night's starting pitcher.
Yeah, last night's starting pitcher. Is he 45? Is that right?
45. Yeah. Oldest player to start a game for the Royals.
But naturally it led to a conversation about Satchel Paige. Yes. And Bob reminded me, I'd forgotten the story, that Satchel in his late 20s or so was having some issues with his arm, but he was somewhere in one of the barnstorming tours, and somebody came up with a potion of rattlesnake venom and gunpowder that they rubbed on his arm, and it never hurt him again. And I questioned Bob about the medicinal value of this, but he actually looked up like active ingredients in each of these things that he thinks might be a thing. So the Royals could use a batch of that.
So the ingredients that are used today in certain remedies. I love when Rich Hill made his first start for the Royals several days before this one. He was in Chicago. He was against the Cubs, and like I said, he was the oldest starting pitcher for the Royals in their franchise history, but not the oldest starting pitcher for a Major League Kansas City team. That was, as you mentioned, Satchel Paige, who at either 58 or 59, nobody can seem to agree on the age, started a game for the Kansas City Athletics in 1965 to pitch 3 innings to qualify for his Major League Baseball pension.
That's right. I forgot it wasn't just a gimmick. It was for that. I seem to recall that they had a rocking chair out for him in between innings, though.
Right, Charlie O. Finley.
I don't know that the Royals are inclined to do that for Rich Hill, but anyway, we make a light of it all. But it does speak a little to their quandary right now, because my goodness, they've had so many injuries in that starting rotation, and now you wonder how they're going to be able to hold that together.
How are they going to piece it together at the end? I mean, they certainly will have Lugo, who, by the way, 52 career starts for the Royals, a 2.98 career ERA. So right now holds the Royals franchise record for career ERA for players of 50 or more starts, which is incredible.
It's remarkable.
He is he's a wonder to behold.
He really is. He sure is.
And so the injuries have piled up. Cole Reagan's probably the most talented of the Royals pitchers, on the shelf for a while, and I think I'm hearing mid to late August return for him?
I think that's, I don't want to say optimistic track, but I think that is the track if, sort of nothing goes awry. Maybe more trending towards late August with some rehab starts perhaps in between a couple of those. So that probably is best case scenario for him.
Michael Lorenzen out with a oblique strain. He'll need to take a rehab start before we see him again, but we don't think that one is terribly serious.
That's my thought, that's more manageable and front loaded a little bit. I don't know the time frame, but I would think it's within the next 10 days to 2 weeks.
And another one, a little under the radar, Daniel Lynch is still out with his elbow nerve irritation. And the reason that's significant is it's not just a bullpen arm, but he's been a spot starter, and when they have bullpen games, which they might need going forward, he's always a part of that. He's a multiple innings reliever.
You're right, and he's sort of in times like this, right? The sort of the bridge guy that you could lean on, but I don't know his time frame.
So the Royals are going to have to come up with some solutions with with a rotation right now of Lugo, Noah Cameron, Michael Wacha, Rich Hill, I guess, for another start or two, and maybe a bullpen game. What are the other possibilities here?
Dallas Keuchel,
of
30,
course.
A mere 37.
That's right. Who's with Omaha now?
It was with Omaha, signed a few weeks ago. I don't really have a sense of where he is in terms of his ability to provide for this team. It is funny though. That would be, I think, at least the seventh All-Star pitcher on this staff this season.
I hadn't thought about that.
I think that's right, because the entire starting rotation, other than Noah Cameron, then Carlos Estevez and Dallas Keuchel.
Keuchel would be,
So, but it's not all of them at once, unfortunately, and not all of them in their prime.
Right, exactly. Well, additionally, the Royals, in addition to signing Lugo and making that bold statement, have added a couple of bats in the last couple of weeks with Randall Grichuk traded from Arizona. And then they picked up Adam Frazier, too, from the Pirates, who has gone the, Pittsburgh, Kansas City route for Adam Frazier. But actually he's had some nice at-bats, and Grichuk has as well. So further proof that the Royals have been in it to win it.
I think so, and I think what's interesting about those moves, look, neither of them were blockbuster moves, but I think the incremental progress for a team that has struggled with a lot of little things, right? And probably I think it benefits from some more veteran leadership. I think that they can kind of spackle in some places that do just enough more to maybe make some differences in, these very nuanced things that can throw a game off.
All right, Vahe, great conversation as always, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks, Blair. All
right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, you're going to hear from Jesse Newell from Missouri Western talking Chiefs.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
We're back on SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog with Chiefs beat writer Jesse Newell. Jesse, the pads came on at Chiefs camp this week. The hitting has started, and I get a little better sense of the team when they're out there in something other than shorts and T-shirts, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, for sure. And some of the biggest storylines that we're going to be talking about are ones from positions that are physical, that require strength and being able to hold up or go get the quarterback in positions where you need to use physicality and hit each other. So some of the guys like Josh Simmons, left tackle, Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle, some of those guys we're not exactly sure about, who we have questions about, who the Chiefs might rely heavily on this season. We need to see those guys out there when it's more football-like conditions, and we've made it to the point in camp where we're definitely to that point.
So Josh Simmons, left tackle, number 1 draft pick, he has – nothing's changed with him. He has been as advertised, pretty solid, and entrenched in the position, I'd say. There is no competition at left tackle. He is your left tackle.
Very rare rotations with Jalen Moore getting in there now. It's a little tricky because they just started getting the pads on, and Juwan Taylor just returned as the team's right tackle here a couple days ago. So, I know Andy Reid, Chiefs coach, always talks about them rotating their guys, but on most of the things we've seen, it's been the left tackle is Josh Simmons, and it does sure seem like he's entrenched. And that might be news to people who haven't really followed it that closely because, we were out there for all those summer practices. That's when we saw Josh Simmons recover from that injury earlier than we thought he would, was out there quicker than we thought he'd be there. And every time we asked Andy Reid about him, he gave a positive update, said how he was working in the training room, how he was picking things up, how his physical movements were just different potentially than other guys that they'd had. And Matt Nagy raved about him as well. So, yeah, the continued stock of Josh Simmons just continues to go at a 45-degree angle up. So, like I said, if you're tuning in a little bit late, you might be surprised to hear that Josh Simmons is so far out ahead of the field, it seems like right now. But that has been the case for a while, and nothing has changed so far in training camp. I'm sure there can be some hesitation there because at this point last year we were talking about Kingsley Suamataia in a very similar position. And then obviously we know how the left tackle position turned out for the Chiefs later in the year. But this seems different with Josh Simmons based off the reactions to him and what coaches are talking about him. And we'll see how the rest of camp goes. But right now I'd be very surprised if he wasn't the starter game 1 for the Chiefs.
It makes me wonder if Josh Simmons will get more snaps in the preseason than Kingsley Suamataia did a year ago. It was a handful, basically.
I remember the Jacksonville game we talked about, how much they're going to let him play because they need to get him reps, and he was 5 or 6 snaps, if I remember right, maybe 9. I mean, if it was 9, that's stretching it, but it was not more than 10, and we were like, oh my gosh, this guy is the left tackle. They're basically
gave him the job.
Yeah, handed him the keys to the city, and again, we all know how that turned out. And it's in that regard, Blair, we have to mention that Kingsley is basically entrenched as left guard, too.
Yes,
that has not been a competition so far between him and whether it be Mike Caliendo. We figured maybe Hunter Norzad would figure in that, but he's been mostly a backup center for the Chiefs. So, yeah, we went into camp thinking that these are kind of the position battles that could be out there on the offensive line, but so far there has not been much indication that the Chiefs actually see these as battles. Now, the question becomes what you do with Jalen Moore, and I think the most obvious thing to do is the Chiefs were caught without a safety net last year with Kingsley, and that really derailed their whole season. And so you have Jalen Moore for 2 years. If he is the backup tackle, the backup left tackle, the backup right tackle, and then next year when they move on from Juwan Taylor and cut him, you could move him to right tackle. I mean, you're being very well paid to be a backup plan for the Kansas City Chiefs and potentially a starter next year. So that makes the most sense to me. But the fact they've rotated him at right tackle, who knows? Who knows how this thing is going to turn out, and potentially if there might be a battle at right tackle. I would not figure that with Juwan Taylor being $27 million against the cap this year, the second highest right tackle in the league. But we'll see how this progresses and see how this plays out. But as of right now, like I said, all systems go for Josh Simmons. It sure seems like he's going to be the starting left tackle for the Chiefs in Week 1.
Right. So Juwan Taylor was on the PUP list for the first week. Started
the non-pad section. Yes, exactly. He came back for pads. Yep.
And so I've noticed that he gets the starting call for the first snap or the first couple of snaps on every drill, 11 on 11 or 7 on 7 that the Chiefs do, or 11 on 11, not 7 on 7. But Jalen Moore does come in and spell him from time to time. Do you see Moore being a swing backup? Could he back up both tackles?
That's absolutely. Well, and also as I'm talking about here, it's interesting because if things go as maybe the perfect world for the Chiefs, it's Simmons at left tackle, Taylor at right tackle. As you're talking about, Blair, Jalen this year being the backup left tackle, or at least option at left tackle if they need him, or if Josh Simmons falls off, or whatever the case may be. But next year, the position in a perfect world is that Josh Simmons is at your left tackle, and they need a starter at right tackle when they move on from Jawan Taylor. So, yes, potentially they're going to need him to be a great left tackle this year, Jalen Moore, if in case of needed, and then a great right tackle next year when they have an open position. And so it would make sense for him to be a very well-paid swing tackle this particular year if things trend as they are. Again, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure Jalen Moore didn't sign that contract thinking he was going to be a backup for the Chiefs this year, and there's still time for him to go out there and just earn some sort of spot, I'm sure, on that offensive line if he just performs the way that he believes he can perform. But like I said, worst to worst for the Chiefs, they're giving themselves multiple options at a position that obviously was a big problem for them at the end of the year.
And, of course, there's Wanye Morris, who will back up at one of the tackles as well.
Yeah, and he seems more comfortable at right tackle. So that again, kind of speaks to what Jalen Moore is to the Chiefs. Even if he doesn't start, could be a very valuable piece, because at left tackle they've given themselves two options, and two options is much better than the zero that they were kind of forced to put up with at the end of last year, forcing a left guard to go play left tackle.
Okay, I want to go over to the other side of the ball and talk about a position group that we really haven't spent a lot of time on, and that's the secondary, the defensive backs. And the reason I bring it up is I started to wonder in the last couple of days watching practice, could Josh Williams be the odd man out in the secondary? Is it possible for one of the members of that, fantastic 2022 draft class to maybe be, on the edge here?
The roster bubble, it is. And I think one of the greatest things you can tell from camp or from us being here every day, Blair, is just the rotations of the ones and the twos and the threes. Because, if people are out there listening, do they care what I think about the left tackle's hands and drills? Probably not. But I sure can tell who's with the first team. I can sure tell who's playing with Patrick Mahomes and who's playing with Chris Jones.
And how they line up.
And how
second team and all that.
It's a pretty good indication of not what I feel about them, but how the Kansas City Chiefs feel about them. And they have to line them up in those ways because you want the most reps going to the top guys, the guys you figure are going to be on your team. And it has been, Josh Williams has been, with the threes quite a bit. And so it's a position where secondary, it's crazy. Pro Football Focus earlier this offseason ranked the secondaries out there, and the Chiefs were second in the NFL behind the Ravens, which I didn't really think about in those terms. But then I thought they do have a lot of depth there, and they did continue to give reinforcements, whether it was Christian Fulton in free agency or it was
Noel Williams
in the draft, by the way, who has been sneaking up and stealing some of those ones reps here lately, has kind of been emerging. I think Joshua Williams is definitely in a fight in a roster bubble situation. Probably still on the right side of it at this point, but they have lots of other options. And we know, like, Steve Spagnuolo loves Najee Johnson. He's kind of mixing with the ones a little bit. Shamari Connor's a recent draft pick who they love as sort of a hybrid player. And then we talked about some of the other guys that are in the mix there. You would think a Mike Edwards is going to take a roster spot because they love him at safety and they love what he did from a couple years ago. And so, you dwindle those numbers down, and all of a sudden there's guys that have been major parts of this team that potentially might not be in the future. Now, with Joshua Williams, you're looking at him like a Chris Roland Wallace. Both of those guys were on the active roster all last year. Roland Wallace can be more of a slot corner, and so that'll depend on how much they want to put McDuffie in the slot. So a lot of different questions go with that. But if you look at Josh Williams, once Jalen Watson got healthy, he did not take cornerback snaps in the playoffs. And so I think their trust level for him was sort of dictated with that. So I do think that's kind of the range you're looking at. Chris Roland Wallace, Joshua Williams, potentially those are the guys that are battling for one of the last cornerback roster spots. And as you said, the Fab Five from the 22 draft class has treated the Chiefs so well. That's one of them that definitely potentially has to earn his way onto this roster.
And something I heard at an Andy Reid press conference earlier this week that I guess I had not heard before was regarding Fulton, that he had some little cleanup surgery in the spring. That was the first I heard that.
Yeah, it's sort of similar to Jawan Taylor because we'd heard the same things about him. He had a cleanup surgery. And so those guys, you just kind of take your time getting back. And that's a major question, too. That's why you like having depth, is because when we asked Andy Reid about Jawan Taylor coming back and Christian Fulton coming back, he said at the time, the first day or 2 days before camp started here in St. Joe, he said, I think Jawan Taylor's closer. Well, we saw 4 days later, Jawan Taylor returned, so he was closer. How far is Christian Fulton out? Again, the Chiefs aren't really required to tell us, and I see Christian Fulton come down the hill every day, and he's got his jersey with him, and he goes in the medical tent and does some sort of stretching stuff. So it's not like he's in a wheelchair or a stretcher or anything like that. He's under his own power, but when he returns is a question mark, and who knows how the injuries play out. That's why you like having multiple bodies you like. Fulton has that injury history. I'm sure the Chiefs hope he can get back because he should be a major part of their defense if he's able to return.
Yep. Let's talk about the return game, and this kind of by extension is also discussing wide receivers, especially the bottom part of the depth chart with wide receivers. I know you have a pretty strong feeling.
A hot take.
Yes, a hot take on this that kind of runs contrary to the press tent.
It does.
At Missouri Western. You let us know. You tell us what you're feeling on this.
So the question becomes Nico Remigio,
Yep.
and he is like the ultimate safety blanket for the Chiefs when it comes to punt return because we know the problems they've had in the past. Guys that don't catch him or only fair catch him or have no dynamic ability in the return game. And to be totally honest, like Nico's great skill is sort of cutting vision, catching the ball. I mean, he's not
a breakaway guy.
He's not a breakaway guy. He's been caught from behind on these things as well. I'm just going back to a few months ago when we were talking to Dave Tobe, the Chief Special Teams Coordinator, about Nico, and he just kind of went out of his way to say that this was going to be a competition and they were going to keep looking. And I'm not as convinced. To be fair, this week when we talked to Dave Tobe, we asked him about returners. He said Nico has been far and away the best one they have. And I have no doubt that's true. And listen, Nico, we've talked to Nico Blair. He's like one of the best guys to talk to. I love talking to him. He grinds his way up. He's not the tallest. He's not the fastest. He's had to earn everything he has. But I do think with the Chiefs and some of the lack of pop that they've had offensively and at the end of their running back or the receiver room, and we heard Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator today, talk about how much he loves their receiver room from top to bottom. I'm not sure Nico's a lock. I hear in the media tent, a lot of people do think he's a lock based off what Dave Tobe said. I think the Chiefs could fake their way on a punt returner to potentially get somebody with a little bit more juice offensively, especially knowing that the back end of that could be utilized and that Rashee Rice potentially is going to be suspended at the start of the season. You might need some more of that playmaking on offense to get you by. So I don't see him as a roster lock yet. If he's on the roster, obviously he was at the end of last year. It's not going to be a super shock, but I'm just not as convinced there because Nico's value is basically special teams. I mean, you're basically keeping him as a special teams only player. And the problem with that is this is not Devin Hester. It's not Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's a very good specialized skill player in that, but he does not have game-breaking, speed, dynamicism, right. all those sorts of things. And we got to remember, too, he fumbled quite a bit last year as well. I mean, he's secure with the catch, but he fumbled a few times leading up to the playoffs and in the playoffs, too. So I'm not convinced of his roster spot like some other people are. I think part of that is based off of Dave Tobe's comments from a couple months ago, but we'll see how it plays out. And obviously, if there's anybody to root for to get a spot, it's Nico because he definitely has earned everything he's gotten and obviously has earned a chance to make his way onto the Chiefs based off of what he's done and shown them in special teams.
Well, and I'll make the case, believe it or not, for Sky Moore in that position.
I think Sky,
he's the number, right now, he seems to be the number 2 return guy, and I think this gets overlooked. He has a lot of experience in this offense, which I think is valuable for what they might be looking for on a roster without Rashee Rice.
So if we're talking ones, Blair, I know people will get mad at me saying this, shooting the messenger, but you talk about the receivers that line up with the ones. Sky Moore is a guy that does it a lot. Tyquan Thornton is a guy that does it a lot. Nico Armio is not a guy that does it a lot. He's with the 2s, sometimes the 3s. And so that to me as well is a little bit of an indication to say if Nico makes the team, they're not going to bank on him to be. They don't see him as a receiver. In that sort of way. Now, today's practice, he got a little bit more run with. So maybe they're starting to come around to like, hey, if you got to keep this guy, you got to figure out a way to make him useful on offense. But that's the numbers crunch we're talking about. I mean, if they go to 6 guys, I guess if you keep Sky Moore and Tyquan Thornton, that's already 7 with Rasheed. Is that correct?
Yep.
It's assuming they keep 7 because Rasheed Rice, if he's suspended, you're going to need an extra body in that spot. But I don't see him cutting Sky. I don't see him cutting Tyquan Thornton. And this becomes a numbers game. And as you mentioned, Blair, you just said this, which is, can you put Sky Moore back there and have him catch punts? I know he's had the history a couple years ago where he was early in his career. That was rookie year when he was dropping them, but he's been catching them in practice for another 3 years. I mean, can he go back there and do it? And what are you missing if you have him do it as compared to Nico Armijo? So, long story. I mean, if you had had other people in the media tent on this, they would have said anybody that tells you otherwise is silly and ridiculous. That's the case I would make for the Chiefs, and it is a very crowded receivers room, and just based off the reps I've seen, it's going to be very hard for me to see them cutting either Sky Moore or Tyquan Thornton. Maybe there's a trade in the works. I don't know. But I do think that Nico, just based off the one-dimensional nature of what he does and based off of, again, him earning everything he has because he doesn't have just dynamic speed, I do think it's going to be still a tough spot for him to earn. And he earned it last year at the end of last year, but it'll be another one he has to earn again this year.
All right, great stuff as always from Chiefs beat writer Jesse Newell. This has been SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports Podcast, presented by Underdog. Thanks to our producers, Monty Davis and Randy Mason, and to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. We'll talk to you again soon.